Mr. Lamy, welcome to my show.
Pleasure.
One of the things we need to have your comments on, latest spar between China and the United States, trade disputes. Is it heading for disaster?
There's a small risk, but I think overall they both have a very strong interest that it does not degenerate in a trade war.
Kevin Rudd said 50-50. What do you think?
I'd say 20-80.
80 meaning having hope.
Yeah.
Of being resolved.
80% probabilities they will handle this tension properly, rationally. There will be a negotiation, whether bilateral or multilateral. 20% it doesn't work, and then there's a much bigger shock, which would be costly both for US, for China, and by the way, also for Europe.
Yeah. When you are saying 80% of having hope, what are some of the factors that would help us to have the hope? Which factors are you looking at closely now to help us understand what is likely to happen?
Depends a bit on what the US are after. Now, if they're after reducing the trade deficit between US and China by 100 billion, forget it, this is not a trade issue. If they are after blowing up the WTO, forget it, this will not work. If they are after improving the US position vis-à-vis China in trade, in security matters, then there is, in my view, room for a proper negotiation, both US and China on the one side, and US, China, Europe, Japan, India within the World Trade Organization.
How much can we figure out about domestic politics inside the United States? Because it's going to have a big impact on the current motives of the White House.
You're absolutely correct. The main reason why they have this offensive position vis-à-vis China in trade is domestic politics. That's what Trump said he would do during his campaign. He needs to show to the people who voted for him that he's handling this cheating China the right way. Now, whether this will drag the whole American system in this direction or not remains an open question. After all, there are lots of businesses in the US who fear a US-China trade war. Lots of Republicans are not protectionists. They know that the US have benefited a lot from the open trade system. So part of the game will be played between now and November, which are the midterm elections, within the US.
Yeah, but at the same time, the president has a lot to say about trade policy.
Yes, although Article 1 of the US Constitution says that the responsibility for treaties of commerce with foreigners and Indians lies with Congress.
Having said that, though, Mr. Lamy, one of the most crucial things is whether this spar of trade between two countries going to drag down the overall international trade system. I'm sure that's one of the biggest your concerns as well. Can China and the European countries, or in other words, China and the EU, be partners in preventing that from happening?
I think what China and EU can do together with India, with Indonesia, with Mexico, with Canada, with Australia, is protect the WTO system.
How?
In creating a situation where if the US want to exit WTO, or if they want to blow up WTO, there will be a coalition that will say, we keep the WTO within ourselves, a sort of WTO minus US. We have this now on climate change. We have this in UNESCO. After all, we may enter a situation where the US may not be the indispensable partner in every direction. And I think there is a very strong, long-term, deeply rooted interest for keeping a rules-based multilateral trading system.
But Mr. Lamy, you know better than I do that countries are already lining up when it comes to steel and aluminum, even though it is only small money. But countries are lining up trying to ask for exceptions coming from the United States. It seems that this coalition is not necessarily being forced right now.
As far as Europe is concerned, and as far as I know, Europe has, for the moment, been exempted of these US sanctions for reasons that have to do with the fact that European countries and most EU members are allied to the US within NATO, and that the ground that this has to do with national security just doesn't float. So it's not a question of negotiating something, it's a question that the ground which Trump says he has to take these measures is just not there.
If that is the case, will the countries be able to line up firmly together with China and some of the others in order to protect the international trade system, because they are safe for now and they can rest?
My view on this is, again, plan A is let's negotiate. The US have problems with WTO, they have problems with the jurisprudence of the court of WTO, fine. What's your problem? We also have problems. China has problems, India has problems. Let's negotiate a package that will lead to improvements in the way the WTO works. If that doesn't work, let's keep a solid WTO, even if the US don't like it.
But Mr. Lamy, time. That's the most important factor. Now the US is delaying the appointment of the judges to the appellate court, and that could delay the overall process of the WTO, not to mention handle some of the issues when it comes to deal with the fundamental issues of structure issues of WTO.
You're right. For the moment, the US have blocked the appointment of judges in the appellate body of the WTO.
Yeah.
There is a solution to that.
What is it?
Solution is, let's create an appellate body in WTO with judges which are not appointed by the US but by other members. If the US don't want to be part of that, fine, don't be part of that. But we will stick to this rules-based system and we will abide by the determination of this patch of an appellate body. So it's again, same solution, appellate body without the US, like we have. I think most countries are thinking in this direction, but are waiting to see whether Trump is bark or bite. If it's just bark, let's wait. If it really bites, let's move.
What do you think, bark or bite?
I think there are signals in two directions.
That's what they want you to feel.
One of us this morning, and don't ask me who it was, said, you should be careful. For the moment, you take Trump literally and not very seriously. You're wrong. You should take him seriously, but not literally. I think this goes a long way to understanding the US position.
What about the future of WTO? You yourself were personally involved in it for years. You yourself have witnessed the problems related to it. Namely, one of the biggest world's economy is not committed anymore before you left your post. So fundamentally, what is happening to WTO? Will WTO be the hope?
For the moment, the answer is yes. Not least because the US, who on the one side block the court, take China to the court. So there's a bit of a contradiction in blocking the court and taking China or others to the court. Now, let's leave that aside. Can such a big organization work without the US? That's something which is difficult to imagine. But mind you, if the US exit WTO, they will also exit the insurance which WTO members have against protectionism when they are members.
But they don't care, probably.
Well, they probably would care because they still are heavily dependent on the international trade. The US economy has a big breathing system with the rest of the world, with Canada, with Mexico, with Latin America, with China, with Europe. It's an economy which is plunged into the world totally interconnected economic system. So assume a country in Latin America decides that US intellectual property rules as enshrined in the WTO system do not matter anymore, that probably would be at a big cost for US pharmaceutical industries.
Where is WTO going? What do you think is the immediate roadmap now that the WTO countries, economies, had to work on for preventing the biggest collateral damage right now?
I think the major danger is damaging the WTO as a system. So it should be protected. China, Europe, Japan, India, Africa should coalesce to protect the WTO. And then it should keep moving forward in adjusting the rules of world trade to a changing technology in areas like digitalization, like data flows, like data protection, like where servers should be localized, in things like e-commerce, in things like small businesses. There are quite a large number of areas where updating the WTO rulebook would make a lot of sense, and this would go, in my view, in the right direction.
Our economies all have problems of our own. Our systems all have problems of our own. While at the same time, the international system urgently needs to be readjusted. It seems that everything happened at the same time. And that is the issue, isn't it? How could you clean your own house while at the same time say, let's have an alliance so that we can embrace the best spring? That's always the distance between the reality and the dream and the hope.
Let's be clear, the present world economy is doing extremely well. All engines are pulling in the right direction. We've never had as much growth for the last 10 years. So it is also a good moment to address a number of problems we have in common, such as, for instance, inequalities or climate change. And this is something which is easier to do in a good economic environment like the one we have for the moment than in bad times. So let's use that spring to a good effect.
Spring is coming. Let's celebrate
Absolutely.
it to make the best use of it. Mr. Lamy, what a
My pleasure
to see you again.